Services as the pro bono coordinator. So this is my first time to see pro bono in action from a different standpoint. And I know now how hard and dedicated and diligent the private bar is when it comes to pro bono services from a very different angle. So this final award is presented in recognition of the attorneys in private or corporate practice who have contributed significant amounts of pro bono work in either terms of numbers of cases handled or the significance of the work, as well as a demonstrated dedication to the development and delivery of legal services to the indigent clients in our communities. In 1995, the Pro Bono Award name was changed to honor Harris A. Gilbert, a Nashville attorney and past president of the Tennessee Bar Association, who was consistently dedicated to the development and delivery of legal services throughout his long career. This year, the Tennessee Bar Association is honoring a group of private attorneys who are serving as the legal team representing families from Nashville's Covenant School in relationship to writings left behind by a former student who shot and killed 3 students and 3 adults at the school in March of 2023. Many of the parents did not want the shooter's writings to become public for fear that those writings might negatively impact their children, inspire copycat shooters, and have a negative impact on the school's security. Among the honorees are 5 Sherrod Rowe lawyers who have contributed more than 50 hours each, including Eric Osborne, Chris Savis, Bill Harbison, Dewey Bransletter, and Francis Perkins. Other firm lawyers who have joined the effort include Alex Carver, Hunter Bransletter, Amy Mohan, Carla Lovell, Chris Whitson, Jack Weber, Micah Bradley, Mark Eisen, Mark Smith, Ryan Holt, and Will Pugh. Eric Osborne's assistant, Jane Harkness, also spent an extraordinary amount of time assisting throughout the proceedings. Eric also recruited expertise outside of Sherrod Rowe, including legal leaders Ed Yarborough, Sarah Naylor, Hal Harden, and Mark Patterson. Since the start of the case in May of 2023, the team has contributed over 1,350 hours of service with a value in excess of $700,000, and their representation continues. We would love to hear from our honorees, and we would like to invite Eric Osborne to come forward to accept the award and to share a few words. This is for you and your team in honor of the work that you've done. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. This case has, for everyone on the team, been the case of a lifetime. Some of us joke that we may write a book someday, and there are too many stories to tell. Hal Harden, recently today, told me at one point that this was the greatest and most meaningful case he has ever worked on. And if you know Hal, and if you know the incredibly illustrious career he has had, that is really a statement. Today I want to talk briefly and just say a few words about this team and how it came together. And what I really want to focus on, because this is a public service award, is the idea of, will you answer the call to serve? I think a lot of us talk about calling in our practice, in our lives. We think about our vocation. And you probably wonder that if the time came, would you answer the call if you were called upon to do something? And the theme of my talk today is calls, because this case quite literally began with a phone call. I was sitting in my home office one morning, and out of the blue, a Covenant dad that I knew called me up, told me about what the families had been going through. It was a sobering call. And he told me that there were some people that wanted the writings to be released, that this whole thing was moving very quickly. But he said that some of the parents had gotten together and they just thought it might be better if the writings didn't come out. And then he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, "Will you help us?" And it was just that direct. Will you help us? And isn't that really the question that all of us have to ask for ourselves every day in what we do in this profession? When a tragedy hits your community, will you help? The answer was over and over again, yes. I first called Bill Harbison from our firm. I explained what the request was. Bill interrupted me and said, "This is the most righteous cause ever. Of course we'll help." I sent an email to the firm, and lawyer after lawyer after lawyer jumped into the case. So much so that I can't even do justice to the work that everyone did, but I'll note that Chris Davis and Francis Perkins each put in more than 200 hours of time on this. Bill Harbison and Dewey Branstetter read every pleading and showed up for every hearing. Alex Carver helped root us for appeals. Ryan Holt found an expert witness who was the world's leading expert on the survivors of gun violence. Our summer associate, Jack Weber, was been there one day when we asked him to spend the weekend, and he worked over a weekend calling families to get forms signed that the court required. My assistant, Jamie Hardin-Squalton, put in hundreds of hours. And ultimately, nearly half of the lawyers in our firm stepped up to help in this case, which is extraordinary in its own right to have half of a law firm come to the aid of these families. But the team grew and it kept growing as person after person answered the call. We realized early on that Ed Yarbrough, who's here today, former U.S. Attorney here in Nashville, had charted a path for us years before when he represented the Vanderbilt rape victim in that terrible, terrible case in 2016. And Ed had tried to create, or not really create, but tried to get an interpretation from the Tennessee Supreme Court about the Tennessee Constitution to establish certain rights for crime victims. In the end, however, while the court ruled for Ed, and he was able to win that case in 2016, they dodged the constitutional issue. And so the issue Ed had tried to establish was not set up in 2016. Bill Harbison called up Ed Yarbrough, and I'm told that when Ed answered the phone, his words were, "I have been waiting for your call. I have unfinished business." Doesn't that make you want to stand up and cheer when a former U.S. attorney says, "I've been waiting for your call. I have unfinished business"? Ed brought on Sarah Naylor from his firm, who became an appellate specialist for us. She wrote our brief in the first appeal. We're now on the second appeal in this case. Then Ed called Hal Harden. Ed and Hal are both former U.S. attorneys, and so now suddenly we have two former U.S. attorneys on our team from different political parties coming together to help us. And Hal and Ed then proceeded to use their influence to call luminary after luminary around the city, like Mark Gwynn, the former head of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and Tory Johnson, the former DA here in Nashville, both of whom gave us declarations to support our case. And so this team of young lawyers and luminaries came together to help these families in a time of need. And yet the bar was not done answering the call. I called up Brad Joya, the headmaster of MBA, to ask if they might write an amicus brief. I got about 1 minute of words out, and Brad interrupted me and said, "We had two families lose loved ones in that shooting. We're all in." Again, don't you want to stand up and cheer when the headmaster of one of the most illustrious schools in town says, "We're all in"? I called up Sims Funk, and they agreed to represent MBA and other schools pro bono with an amicus brief. Then I called up David Braden, who was also acting in the pro bono capacity to represent the Hales, the surviving parents of the shooter. I asked David if he would consider transferring ownership of the documents to Hawthorne House. David Braden said to me, "Can I really do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I think you can." And he made it happen. And then David Braden called up Jeff Mobley, and Jeff Mobley, in a pro bono capacity, represented the estate of Audrey Hale and probated that so that we could indeed get the transfer of the documents. Person after person kept doing work. There was Peter Klett and Naylor Bay Dewey, who represented Covenant School. Rocky King, who did amazing work for Covenant Church. It felt at times as if the entire bar was coming together to help these families during this time. But we had one last card to play, and that was that we came up with what some people are calling our novel copyright argument, that we would assert copyright to try to prevent the release of these writings. Chancellor Miles, after the show pause hearing in April of 2024, asked for supplemental briefing on copyright. And I called up Mark Patterson, perhaps the most legendary copyright lawyer in the state. And Mark Patterson, who had been retired for 4 years, think about this, right? He'd been retired for 4 years, came out of retirement to write our copyright brief and help us with that. Later, I was talking to a Covenant family, and I was trying to explain to them how amazing it was to have Mark do this. And I said, it's as if you pulled an all-star off the bench in the bottom of the ninth. And Nader Beydoun, who overheard that, interjected and said, all-star? You pulled Babe Ruth off the bench. Will you answer the call? Imagine someday in the future you've been retired for 4 years. You stop practicing law again. Will you answer the call to help people in need when your community is hit by tragedy? And what was the result of all this? Well, the good news is that we won, at least for now. Case is on appeal. Over the summer, the Guardian of London wrote a front page article about our novel copyright argument. And the article detailed how victims of school shootings around the world, not just in the United States, are now starting to use copyright, the argument we developed, to support and protect their families. So I think it's fair to say that whenever your legal work has a London newspaper writing a front page article about how your work is inspiring lawyers around the world, you know you've done well. But I want to leave you with something that I think is even more poignant and direct that has really stuck with me. We had a celebration last year with the Covenant parents, a wonderful celebration about what had happened. And in the process of that, there was a Covenant dad who came up to me, and I could tell he was a little timid, and then he just came up and he just had tears in his face, and shook my hand, and these were the words he said. He said, we were struggling. Every day, something new was coming our way. It just seemed like we were having hit after hit. And then it was as if you and the legal team of lawyers, you came around us and you built a wall and you said, no more harm will come to you. You came around us and you built a wall and you said, no more harm will come to you. Isn't that what it means to be a lawyer? Isn't the greatest honor any of us have to be able to have a person in need and to say, I am here, I will help, and no more harm will come to you. That's the incredible thing that we as counsel have the ability to do. And so what I hope is that as you hear about this collaborative team that's worked together for the last 2 years across 4 law firms from Covenant parents, 8 or 9 firms if you count all the other people who did work for others as part of this case, I hope that you'll find it an inspiration, and also that it will be the first of many times when our bar may come together so that no more harm will come to the people in need in our community. Thank you.